name is Les. I'm your host, and I really appreciate you being here. So, something that has been really top of mind for me is this idea of choice. And when it comes to our careers, maybe things that happen in our families, things that happen around us, it can feel like a lot of circumstances happen to us. And something that I've been reflecting on a lot lately is what does it mean to choose ourselves? And what does that look like, even if it's something we're not used to doing? So I'm really excited to bring on a special guest today who can talk a lot about choosing herself because she has done so in a really big way this year. So please join me in welcoming Miss Eni Popoola, who is a content creator, beauty guru, attorney, and just overall that girl.
Oh my gosh. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. So excited to chat with you, Les.
I'm so excited to have you here.
Yeah.
Definitely. So you have had a really big 2023. Like a lot of change has happened for you this year.
Yes.
I would love to talk a little bit more about that.
Yes. Yeah. It's really funny because 2022 for me was my big milestone year in so many ways. Graduating from law school, taking the bar, passing the bar, moving into my first apartment, starting my first corporate job. And there were a lot of things, even from a different vantage point, like I had made the Sephora squad, which was also a big career milestone for me. And so I thought 2023 was going to be a calm year. I thought it was going to be a year of just, being still. And this year has been the opposite for me. I started in October 2022. I started in my first corporate job. So actually almost a year ago. And, things were picking up on the content creation side of things. And in March, completely unexpectedly got called in for a meeting with, the partner that I was assigned to. And immediately she said, it's pretty much come to our attention that, you work with brands in your capacity as a blogger, as a content creator. And I've been pretty transparent about the fact that I had a blog, that I was on social media. It was on my resume as an interest of mine. I didn't really like to bring it into the workplace, but it was something that I could use as just hey, I have a life. I'm a person outside of work, because these type of jobs, at least in theory, when you're interviewing, want to know what else you do.
Right.
And so that had always been clear. But in this meeting, she essentially told me that I had to stop working with brands and that I had to stop creating sponsored posts because it went against the outside of work activity policy, which basically said you can't take on any work, legal or non-legal. And, there was a process for getting exceptions, but that this wasn't really the type of things that they made exceptions for. And so it was pretty crystal clear. And immediately in that moment, I was like, I have to quit this job. I vividly remember sitting in that meeting and thinking, I have to quit. And my second thought was, well, what if I stop taking sponsored posts? And I haven't really told anyone that publicly yet, but there were other parts of the meeting that made me feel like the issue wasn't just the sponsored posts, that I shouldn't have had the time to do this, that with the workload of what it means to be at a big law firm and what it seems like the amount of work that goes into being a content creator, that I shouldn't really have the time to do this and that it wasn't really, compatible with the profession. And that to me led me feel like even if I stopped the sponsored posts, it seems like the issue here is creating content.
Yeah.
And that was when I really was like, I have to leave this job because I was already pretty restless and growing pretty unhappy with my job there. And content creation was the thing that gets me through it. Okay, I don't really love this job, but I have something else that inspires creativity. I have something else that gets me excited. I have something else that can get me through the non-exciting things. And so without that in the picture, I was like, I am truly going to be a miserable person. And I cannot lose the one thing that makes this place a little bit more bearable for me. So I left my job. But at the end of that week, I knew in that moment, the meeting was on a Tuesday. the day after my 28th birthday, actually. So for me, it was a little
Oh
bit
my
symbolic. I
goodness.
was like,
Yeah.
oh, God is telling me like, I gotta be at 28. We're doing something new.
Yes.
And so I knew that week that I was leaving. I had spent the week kind of talking to different people, weighing the options of like, do I try and find another law firm? Do I leave and figure it out after that? Do I speak to an employment attorney and figure out if there's anything here, all of those things. And I knew at the end of the week, I was like, I don't want to come back here to work on Monday. On Wednesday, when I left the office, I took my things because I was like, I'm not coming back to this office. And Friday, I submitted a letter of resignation and I was like, this was my last day of work. No 2 weeks, no anything like that. I was like, I'm done here. And like, that's the end of that. So that was hands down the biggest change that I went through this year.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I just have to say kudos to you for listening to your gut in that moment and just being able to walk out on faith in that way and in abundance in that way. Because I think it would also be understandable if someone's in that position to be like, okay, this is what my employer wants. This is what I should do. I should have a stable XYZ. You know, I've gone to law school. I've done all of these things to get to this point. But you could tell that there was something else there and you really chose what you thought would make you happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think a lot of people also don't realize like and I'm not the type of person at all to do something like what I did at all.
Yeah.
Like at all. I'm not a risk taker. I'm not okay, well, like, forget about it. And I honestly, when I think about it, I don't even know what like possessed me in that moment to act the way that I did. But I really think potentially this past January, I feel like there were just a number of seeds like planted that just like inspired in me the desire to stop wasting time doing things that I don't want to do.
Yes.
I went to the doctor and started with a new doctor because I got new insurance. So I had a new doctor or whatever. And so she's getting to know me and she's like, what do you do? I said, I work at a law firm. She asked me if I liked the work that I did. And I was like, no, no, like it was almost insulting the question. I was like, oh, you don't know how this works. You don't get to do the stuff that you like to do straight out of law school. You do the stuff that you have to do. And before she left, like at the end of the visit, she was like, we have to get you doing something that you want to do. And for me, I kind of was just like, what, like, is it really that simple? Like, or is it even really that serious? Like, I thought most people would have accepted like, oh yeah, like you do the thing for 2 years and then you leave.
Yeah.
And then after that, I had like a friend or a law school classmate who I had come to find out was just doing something so different. Like, and it was just so like, oh, like this doesn't make sense. Like we just graduated law school. This person is doing something that does not make sense for what you typically think we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so at that point, like I had texted my friend and I was just like, how long would you give yourself to start doing the things that you want to do? Because like, people say 2 years here, 3 years here. And I'm really just at a place where I'm like, actually, like, when? Like, what's like, I thought I was going to be here for 3 years. Now it's looking like 2. Now it's looking like 1.5. And now I'm like, at a year, I need to be out of here. Like, I genuinely don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And I think, like, especially as people, if you go to school often or if you spend a lot of your years in school, like, that becomes okay, law school is hard, but it's 3 years and you get through it. College is hard, but it's 4 years and you get through it. Like, we put a time that we say, like, we just have to stick it out for X amount of time.
Yeah.
And then we get to say that again when it comes to like these large law firms. Like, it's really hard, but just stick it out for 2 years, stick it out for 3 years. And I'm like, I don't want my life to be a series of me sticking it out.
Exactly.
I want to be at a place where I'm like, all right, like, let me get to what I want to do in as much time as possible. So that's really what I think where I was when I made that decision mentally.
Definitely. And you bring up such a good point where I do think we get conditioned to almost continuously go through these situations where we're constantly pushing through. And obviously in life, there's challenges, there are different things that may require more of us. But do we want to be in a state where we're constantly pushing through, constantly counting down, and we can't enjoy where we are?
Right. Yeah, no, I'm not saying that I dream of work, right? Like, I'm not saying that I have like a dream job, but like there are certain things that once I get started working on them, I won't want to stop. Like
Yes.
there are certain things that I'll like wake up and I'll be like, oh, I'm excited to do this. Like I'm excited. And like it might be planning a dinner party, or it might be, you know, putting an outfit together, or it might be editing a video. And like, even though it's work, like I'm genuinely excited to do the work. And so I would much rather get to the work that I don't have to stick out. And I would much rather have the work that I just like am excited to do. It can still be exhausting, right? But like it's fulfilling in a way that the sticking it through work isn't.
Right.
So yeah, I think we get to this place where we're like, just, you know, stick it out. But I'm just like, sure, like stick it out because work is hard, but not because like you don't want to do it at all.
Yeah, exactly. Like at some point, we want to enjoy the process too. If we're only looking forward to a series of destinations, that's really unfulfilling.
Right.
So as you made the transition out of Big Law into full-time content creation, what was that like? Like I would imagine going from a really structured environment and also having to juggle a lot, because working in law is very demanding, even when you're just doing that. So when you're juggling both Big Law and content creation, now you're moving into a space where you have full-time content creation. What was that transition like for you?
Yeah. So initially, one, like in the immediate transition, it was a little bit overwhelming because I shared my story online, fully not thinking that it would be a viral moment for me, but it definitely was a conversation starter. I really shared it with my audience to just let them know that the day in the life of a law firm associate is no longer going to be a thing. And to just say like, hey, things are going to be different around here. But that was a little bit of a viral moment. So it was not only a transition, but it was like a public moment for me. And so that was just interesting to navigate. And thankfully I had the help of family and friends and all of those things to help me navigate that. On a day-to-day level, like once things settled down and things were you know, kind of back to normal, the transition wasn't that bad. I personally still decided to maintain the schedule that I had while I was working at a law firm. And honestly, the schedule that I had for myself was based on me having two responsibilities. So for example, I shifted my wake up time to 5:30 in the morning because if I wake up earlier, I would have more time to, you know, maybe send off some emails related to content creation before pivoting and doing work for the day. The agency that I was with at the time, like had an understanding that if I had a sponsored post deadline, like I would need at least a weekend in between when the deadline was given and when the content was due. So that like, because I would only film on the weekends, like I would not be able to film during the day. I can't film a makeup video until the sun is down and natural light is best, all of those things. But honestly, it felt pretty seamless in a way because there is enough work that I could do. When I was working at a law firm, I was constantly turning down opportunities. I constantly was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to attend this event that you have because I don't know if I'm going to be off of work. And so now it's like, okay, I can go to the events. I can, you know, meet the people. I can meet some of the people who I've been emailing. I can sit and I can film and edit all hours of the day. I can travel now. And a lot of the structure that I had when I was at the law firm, which in a way, like there's structure at the law firm, but sometimes there isn't because you don't know how your day is going to go. And so in that way, I even had a little bit more control over my schedule and over setting the time that I would spend working on things. But overall, it was a pretty smooth transition, but I still have to maintain a lot of the routines and a lot of the systems that I put in place to make sure that I'm staying on top of things.
And we love routines and systems here at Balanced Black Girl. Can you tell us what some of those routines have been that have helped you?
Yeah. So I often post about this on my stories as well. So I'll wake up, I'll like watch the sunrise. I'll go to the gym for sure. I will, you know, have a little bit of breakfast or a breakfast smoothie or protein shake. I'll read my Bible and do my skincare routine, shower. And after all of that is done, then I'm like ready to start work for the day. So I'll sit down and then check emails to get me started and then look at what I have due for the week or what's on the agenda for the day, and then just go from there.
But having that foundation to your day sounds really helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Starting my day off the same exact way every single day is really big for me.
Definitely. And you also like have really fantastic discipline.
Thank you.
Do that while
you.
being self-employed takes a lot of discipline.
Thank you.
Yeah, which is not surprising because that's what got you to this point through law school to where you're at.
Right.
So not surprised at all.
Thank you.
So now that you're in full-time content creation, I'm curious what it's been like for you in terms of maintaining those boundaries. How do you maintain what to share, what to keep to yourself, and kind of keep social media in check now that it's your full-time job?
Yes, that is a good question. And I say that because now that it's my full-time, I should have said this when we talked about the transition. Because when it wasn't my full-time job, I always had goals, right? Like I always wanted to grow. I always wanted to have certain opportunities, but there wasn't as much pressure that I put on myself to achieve those goals because it was like, well, this is not my full-time job. Like this is for fun. Like the sponsored posts and the opportunities are the cherry on top, but like this is not even what I'm here for. And transitioning into it being my job full-time, it's like there's a little bit more pressure on growing. There's a little bit more pressure on hitting certain milestones and getting certain opportunities that make it such that boundaries are important, like now more than ever.
For sure.
Because some of the things that I know might go viral might be things that I don't really want to talk about. Or some of the things that might go viral might be things that share a little bit too much information about my family or my friends. So when I started out creating, had a list of just like things that I would not really feel comfortable talking about. My like big boundary is if they didn't sign up for it, I'm not really going to share about them. So a lot of times, like I don't really share that much content about my friends, and I don't even really like to feature them, even though I have them and they're a part of my life because they didn't necessarily sign up for this. I don't share content about my family members or with my family often because they didn't really sign up for this. And another boundary or rule that I have is if I'm not willing to invite commentary on it, I don't want to share about it. And so I think about family, like if I don't want someone commenting on my mom's outfit or my brother's hair or whatever, like I better not, like then I can't, then it has to be off limits because like just because I'm posting about it doesn't mean I'm inviting that commentary, but like I have the awareness to know that that's how people online operate. And especially with something like TikTok where the reach can go far greater than you can ever imagine. Like if I'm not willing to hear what people have to say about something, then I don't want to post that something. So those have been my big boundaries and like helping me figure out like what to share and what not to share.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And through my content creation experience, I've had really similar boundaries where I'm like, okay, these whatever pillars, I'm willing to go all in deep on those. These specific things, off limits, we don't even talk about it so that nobody feels entitled to that information. And I think when you do it that way, you do create a sense of closeness with your audience where they do feel like they know you because you're willing to go all in on some things that sometimes they don't even notice what you're not talking about.
Right. It's so funny because one day I want to say earlier this year, like posted a video that was like kind of it was a dating related video. And I don't often talk about I talk about dating in theory, but not like personally. And that's typically where I draw the boundary. Like I'll like draw on maybe some experiences, but the moment it's like, oh, someone can gather who this was about or someone can gather when I'm like, I'm not going to go that deep into detail, but I shared a story that I had that was like, I guess pretty personal. And someone commented like, like interesting. Like, this is not really the type of stuff that you normally post. I'm surprised to see something like this from you, but thanks for sharing. And like, for me, I was like happy because I was like, oh, like, so they notice when like, they know what my boundaries are, even if I haven't really stated it, that like people can tell like, oh, this is not like, we know that she's willing to go this far and we know that she doesn't usually talk about this type of stuff. So that's why I think even having boundaries, even if you don't necessarily say like, I'm not going to ever post about these sorts of things, like having them still pays off in the long run because an audience and a community can tell what they are.
Yeah, and it's hard to take that back
Mhm.
too, because I've seen instances where people do build platforms off of things like their dating experiences or their romantic relationships. And then when things change, they don't want to talk about it. And the audience is like, well, you brought us along this far. And I think anybody can instate a boundary at any time. So if
Mhm.
you don't want to talk about something, don't. But it can be a little bit jarring to make that switch all of a sudden.
Right, right. And the same even applies to content around your job.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There was I feel like it's not as prevalent as now these days, but there was a time where, it was day in my life at
Mhm.
this tech company, or day in my
Right.
life at this firm, or a day in my life working at this consulting um company. And I think we're in an era partially in part due to my experience, I think, where these companies are really like trying to crack down on that and
Yeah.
trying to like not have that be a thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
even then, like oftentimes, and personally, my boundary was when I was working at my firm was I'm never going to record in office. I'm
Yep.
never going to film. Like I'm just not going to bring the two together.
Yep.
But I think, yeah, oftentimes there are a lot of content creators who struggle when they lose a pillar of their content that
Mm-hmm.
kind of involved other people or other factors.
Yeah.
So it's definitely hard in those situations.
Definitely. Yeah. And I'm with you. I mean, maybe too, with me being like a millennial and being a little bit older, I just always felt like social media was so separate from work. Like,
Same.
I still have a corporate job, but I never talk about what it is. I'm always like marketing, but never the specifics
Right.
because I think just coming up when I did, it was like those two things are totally separate. So when people are like, come to the office with me, I'm like, oh no.
No, it was jarring. Like
Yes.
I didn't even put what firm I was working at on my LinkedIn because I was
Hmm.
like, I don't want it to be, I mean, people can still find out, and they did still find out, but
Do a little work.
right,
I'm not going to hand
exactly.
that to
I'm
you.
like, the words never came from my mouth. Like I
Yeah.
never shared where I worked because
Hmm.
it just had to be separate.
Yep.
Like, and whether or not that's a good thing, right, is separate from what reality is. And the
Mhm.
reality is there is a bit of a generational divide.
Mhm.
And there are two schools of thought about like, whether social media can be good for work or good for recruiting or good for diversity versus, some people who think that it has no place in the workplace whatsoever under any circumstances. And I am not trying to, I did not take on the role of being the social media freedom fighter advocate in the workplace. So I hadn't really made that. That's not my concern. And
Mhm.
just the awareness of the fact that there are people who do not like it in the workplace
Yep.
was enough for me to say, like, I don't want to do that.
Right.
And it wasn't even the fact that other people don't like it. It was just
Mhm.
the fact that, like, I don't really like it either. Like, I
Mhm.
want some places where I'm just like, yeah, I'm just doing my job.
Mhm.
And like we can talk about the other fun things that I do outside of it, because my content when I started
Mhm.
it was meant to be an escape from law school, was
Right.
meant to be an escape from work. Like
Yeah.
I was a teacher before law school, and that was
Mhm.
when I had started it. And
Mhm.
my content was never really about like the stuff that I did at work per
Right.
se. It was just
Mhm.
like the fact that I being a teacher was a part of my identity at that moment in time. So yeah, that's definitely where I stand on that.
Definitely. And having that as a creative outlet as
Yes.
opposed to like, this is the totality of who I am.
Right, right.
Mhm. Yeah. So you also recently had a few videos where you were talking a little bit more about dating and some
Hmm.
of your boundaries around dating. One of your boundaries that you said I really liked, and I would love to talk about this a little bit more, where you said you are not interested in dating somebody who is like a fan or kind of familiar
Mm,
with you because of social media. Can you
yeah.
talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't I'm like I don't mean to be like, "Oh, I have fans," like whatever, but more so like the energy of like being a fan. And there's a fine line, right?
Yeah.
Because I want to date and be with someone who is supportive of what I do.
Yeah.
However, I think if you are using my content as a means of getting to know me, that's where we
Exactly.
get to the like kind of like I love your content. I love what you said about this and da 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 da. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, whoa, like
Mhm.
that's not really that desirable,
Yeah.
because I have been in instances like that before,
Yeah.
and it feels like there's a knowledge gap,
Mhm.
because someone who like has that information or has all of the information that I share online about me and like
Yeah.
has studied it is able to make decisions about where to take me on dates, or just knows information about me. And
Mhm.
so it feels like I know nothing about you and you know a bunch of stuff about me.
Yep.
And so it feels like I'm playing catch up, or I might feel bad because I'm just like, oh, like, I didn't know that but I have siblings, I'm from New York, like we don't share the same experience in getting to know each other.
Yep.
And that's why I kind of have that boundary. I'm just like, no, like, don't sit and read my entire blog website. Like, maybe do that like once we've already established that. But like when you're coming to me with information, like, yeah, like you said once in one of these blog posts that like this, time, the third, like, tell me more about that. Like, it feels like an interview. It feels not like we're trying to get to know each other. So definitely like love being supportive, but don't necessarily want someone studying me through my content.
100%. I completely agree. And I've had a really similar boundary when it comes to dating, because it's like, I want you to get to know me through spending time with me. And then it's like, okay, are you being yourself? Are you being authentic? Or are you doing things because you think I would like it based off of what you saw?
Right.
And then the vibes are off.
Right.
At that point.
Right. It's like, just get to know me.
Yeah.
Get to know me. You can, it's fine. You'll know what I do. Right. But, and you'll see some of the things that I post. Like, it's like, like the pictures, sure. But like, don't, be out here studying. Like, we can, like, the information that I share, you can get by spending time with me. Like, you don't have to get it through looking up what I've posted online. Like, you have access to me. So like, the access to me is a much better source of that information than what I've posted online. And like, if I'm giving you the opportunity to have access to me, like, let's just get to know each other that way.
100%. Yeah. I've usually not told people about like podcasting or content until a few dates in, when I'm like, okay, I think there's something here that I want to explore. But I did one time. I was on a first date with this guy, and I had established it pretty early in the date that was going to be the only date. And so I obviously was like dancing around it being vague. And then I had a lovely balanced Black girl listener come up to us at the restaurant and be like, Les, oh my God, hi. And I was just like,
that is a thing. No, literally, that is a thing that's hilarious too. When you're like outside with someone and like someone recognizes you, and then you're just like, my cover is blown.
I know.
And they're
I was like, now I got to explain this.
No, truly.
Right.
It'll be, 'cause even sometimes when I meet people, when I meet like potential romantic interests, like I'll share my number before I share my Instagram.
Yep.
But then I remember one day I was like talking to someone, and like I had given my number, and then someone comes up like, oh, we love your Instagram content, da 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 da. And he's like, what do you have going on Instagram? Like, now I want to see, like, what's your Instagram? And I was like, cover is blown. Yeah. But yeah, I have nothing to hide. But sometimes I have to pick apart what's really at play, because it could be like the boundaries, and I would appreciate getting to know you in person. But sometimes it's someone who has a lot of things, markers of stereotypical success. Sometimes it's like, what also could be at play is me being a little bit worried that like there's yet another thing on the list that might intimidate somebody. And like, yes, yeah, you don't want a man who's intimidated by you or whatever, but sometimes I think the reality is like, that is a concern sometimes, and I have to parse through like what's at play. It's like, I don't want this person to be scared off by the fact that like I have a social media and that like a lot of people like are familiar with my content. So sometimes I have to work through like what's really at play here. Like, is it the getting to, and sometimes I think it's just both. I think it's both.
Yeah. And it's a lot to think about all at once. Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, but not quite, dating. I love your solo date content that you do. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I've like kind of fallen off on solo dates, but I did go to one recently. And it's really funny because I really do think solo dates are just spending time with yourself outside of the home.
Yes. Yep.
And it's spending time with yourself, because the reality is like, as someone who lives alone and does a majority of the things that I do on my day-to-day alone, like every day is a solo date, theoretically.
Yes.
But when the same way as a date where you set aside time for an activity, doing that alone is just really great, because I'll use it as an opportunity to do some of the things that I've always wanted to do and felt like I needed someone to do something with, but realized I don't, right? Like, and I love it because as I continue to do it, it becomes more I don't think the word is intuitive, but it becomes almost like a reflex. And that's
Mhm.
the same way I am with like routines. Like,
Mhm.
so I'll see something really cool and exciting. And before I might have been like, oh, let me go ask my close friends, like who's available, who's free.
Yeah.
And now it's gotten to the point where like my friends are like, dang, like I would have loved to go to this with
You
you,
just
but like
went.
you just booked it and went. And I'm just like, oh shoot. Like I forget, but I've gotten so comfortable with just like going out and trying
Mhm.
new things because I'm just like, oh, like I don't have to wait for anyone. So
Yeah.
whether it's a bar, a
Mhm.
hotel rooftop, a
Yep.
restaurant, usually there has to be food involved. I said bar, but like really it's a restaurant that has a bar and I might sit at the bar and
Mhm.
eat the food at the bar.
Mhm.
But bar, restaurant, I
Yeah.
recently went to a cake decorating class, so that was fun.
Fun.
But I've also like traveled solo. I went to
Mhm.
Bali by myself last
Mhm.
year. So I really just gotten comfortable with just doing things by myself. And that a lot of times stems from the place of recognizing that I do most of the things that I do on a day to day by myself, right?
Yeah.
Like if I can go to the grocery store alone, I go to workout classes sometimes
Mhm.
alone, like it is okay.
Yeah.
And so, okay, what's the difference between sitting at home and eating dinner and sitting at a restaurant and eating dinner?
Mhm.
That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, definitely. I've had really similar experiences because I've done a lot of solo travel this year. And so I had a lot of
Nice.
people ask, oh my gosh, solo travel, was it so transformative? And I was like, you know, not really. Because
Right.
like I already do my own thing a lot and I live alone. So I'm just doing my own thing in a different place, which you still learn a lot about
Hmm.
yourself, even if instead of like staying at home for dinner, you go to a different environment at a restaurant. Like you can still learn about yourself going to different environments. But I'm like, when you're used to just kind of vibing and doing your own thing, you do your own thing in different places.
Right, right. No, I totally hear that. And I'm even thinking about like anytime people are like, oh, solo travel, like what is that like? I'm like, well, sometimes I just envision like I'm scouting the country for if I wanted to move here. Like
Mhm.
people move to new cities by themselves,
Yep.
people move to new countries by themselves. So when
Mhm.
people are like, is it dangerous, like da, 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 I'm kind of just like, people have moved here, like
Mhm.
people live here, I could move here,
Yeah.
like, so for me it's just like I'm just scoping out a new country to
Yeah.
potentially move to. I don't actually have plans to move to the country, but
Mhm.
that's what really helps me when I'm thinking about like, oh, is it scary to travel abroad by yourself? I'm like, if I were starting from scratch in a new city, in a new at a new place, like this is I would have to, like this
Mhm.
would have to be the experience.
Yeah.
And so that's also helpful because I think it helps me not get too attached to a place or not get too dependent on
Mhm.
other people
Yep.
to make certain decisions, because sometimes you do have to pick up and start all over again.
Yep.
And I think spending more time with yourself solo helps get in that place where you're able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as someone who's a little bit older, I've had the experience where a lot of my 20s kind of passed me by and I didn't do a lot of things that I wanted to do because I was waiting to have
Mm,
other people to do it with. And sometimes that just falls through schedules, budgets, whatever. People can't always be where you're at to do the things you want to do. And I do kind of regret that a little bit when
mm.
I was younger waiting. And I think that's why now that I'm a little older, I'm like, I'll just go. So yeah, people can't necessarily let life pass them by or not do things that they really want to do waiting on other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like we live a life, like we are the main character of our lives, and
Right.
like that means that there are going to be some certain things that we have to do
Exactly.
on our own. And even if we don't have to do them on our own, it's
Mhm.
like just knowing that we can do them on
Mhm.
our own sometimes it's helpful too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can also have amazing experiences, meet amazing people,
I meet
which is
so
the
many people when I'm
best.
by myself. Like
Yes.
when I went solo to Bali last year, and that experience was mainly because no one else was available at the time, and I
Mhm.
was like, I don't know the next time I'm going to be able to travel to the other side of the world. I was just
Mhm.
about to start a new job that I knew was going to be pretty demanding. And so I
Mhm.
was like, if I don't really go to Bali now, like, I don't know when I'm going to be able to take 2, 3 weeks off to go to Bali, because that's not a
Right.
short trip.
Yeah.
And night one, I was there, and, another, not a travel, but there's a group based in Bali called Black in Bali.
Mhm.
And like immediate first night I'm there, I met a ton of people. And now I'm like, all right, I'm set for the trip. Like that was it, right? Like you're
Right.
never really solo. You're
Mhm.
maybe moving through the world on your own, but you're never really like the only person in a situation because there are people across the world. So
Yeah.
yeah, I meet so many people when I'm out by myself. Like I think that even encourages meeting people, because you're just like, oh, like what's your story, what's your vibe, why are you
Right.
here?
Exactly.
There's a curiosity that comes with seeing people by themselves.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's actually ironically, being out alone is a great social activity.
It absolutely is. And I think sometimes when you have those interactions with people, even if it's just in passing, like learning someone's story, you never see them again, those interactions can be such a blessing where if you are only out maybe with your group of friends or with a partner or whatever, you can be a little bit closed off to those interactions. And I think doing things solo just keeps you open in a really beautiful way.
Right. Agreed, for sure.
Yeah. So as we start to close out the year, what are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to travel. I traveled out of the country once this year. I went to Nigeria in April for a wedding. So that wasn't quite vacation. It was like a week-long wedding. There were wedding activities every single day. So it was like the wedding was the travel. But I am so excited. I'm going to Kenya and Zanzibar in October, and I'm stopping by Austin rather, for Afrotech for a little bit. So excited to, be social.
Yes.
And then at the end of November or start of December, I'm going to South Africa, and I'm so excited for South Africa as well.
Yes.
And then at the end of December, I'm going to Ghana, and then we'll do the first week of January in Nigeria. So just a lot of travel to Africa, which I'm really excited about.
Yes.
That's like the source and inspiration of a lot of like my excitement towards the end of the year. And I'm just such a big Christmas girl too. Like I'm ready for that Christmas tree to be up. Like the first day I see 50-degree weather as the high, I'm like, oh, the tree might as well be up. Yeah. So
sure.
I'm excited for all of those things.
I love that. Well, I'm excited. Whatever you decide to share of your trips, I'm excited to see it all.
Yeah, I think my Kenya and Zanzibar trip is going to be like a true vacation. So I'm not even like thinking about outfits, or I'm just like, what would I pack if I were just trying to chill, right?
Yeah.
But like, I think I'm going to get heavy into the content for South Africa and Ghana and Nigeria. So yeah, I'm excited to share all of that.
Oh, that's going to be so good. And what's inspiring you creatively right now?
Yeah. So right now, I think creatively, I'm inspired by just the concept of, I think I feel like I'm like going through like a personal creative renaissance. And so I think what's inspiring me creatively is my childhood. I think looking back on some of the things that I did as a child and realizing like, oh, those were like true things that I love. And they were almost like foreshadowing or foretelling of my future in a way. So like I was an easy bake oven kid through and through. And like I really do love to bake and I love to cook. And I've been getting back into that because I didn't necessarily have the time to do it fully when I was like working at a law firm. And like I was walking through Whole Foods one day randomly as I was like, I think I was trying to make creme brulee, which I did, and it turned out really nice, which was like so exciting that it was like, creme brulee. And like I was just excited by like all of the ingredients. And I'm just like, oh, like they have a vanilla bean, right? Like they have like the flaky sea salts that I need, and they have the like random castor sugar. Like they have, and I'm just like, oh, grocery stores are so exciting because like their ingredients here, and like whatever you need, like it is at the grocery store. Depending on where you are, we can get a whole conversation about access and things like that. But I was excited by just the ingredients on the shelves at the grocery store and the fact that I could make the random things that I wanted to make. So looking back on my childhood, I'm like, oh, I really loved the easy bake oven. I really loved teaching. Like on some birthday, like asked for a chalkboard. Like I was like, I just want like a chalkboard so I can be a pretend teacher. And like, I actually was a teacher at some point. And I loved, through my content, I love to educate as well. And so I'm like, like all of these things that I did as a child, like they were true loves, and I got to love them without restriction. And like going back to those things has really inspired me in a lot of ways. So I'm just really excited to kind of go back to some of the basic things that I got to do as a child that brought me excitement. Because I think like there was something there.
That is so inspiring. I think there is something to the interests that our young selves have before we get programmed to think that like certain things are realistic or good or bad, like those innate things that we're drawn to and interested in, those are definitely still within us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think just thinking about creativity and what it looks like through the years, like I think as kids, we're so free to be creative and it gets a little bit stifled as we get older. And so just thinking about what creativity looks like as an adult it's been a process, but it's also really exciting.
Absolutely. And something that I noticed was a theme kind of in that last answer that you gave, and something that you said at the beginning of the conversation was finding joy in the little things and getting excited about the little things, whether that's like finding your vanilla bean at the grocery store or getting excited about an outfit that you were putting together, even while you were still in law. Like, it sounds like you do a really good job being present and getting excited about the little things, which I think is so important.
Thank you. Yeah. Sometimes I'll have like moments where it's like hard for me to even explain just the like certain mundane things can be so mind-blowing.
Yes.
Like my mind will forever be blown at like lightning bugs. And like that's probably gonna be my like key word for when I'm just like think about how crazy that is. Like, these are insects that are creating light, like literal light. Like, what is going on here? And so, yeah, I think just having those little things that I'm just like, whoa, like this is way more massive than we give it credit for. Like, this is way more like, I think those things like keep me creative and keep me just like in awe of the world around us, which is just such a good feeling to have.
It is. It's something that I think we take for granted, especially as we get older. A few years ago, I was hanging out with a friend of mine. She has 2 young daughters, and she had these like flowers on the table, and her daughter had like leaned over to get something on the table and realized that the flowers smelled good. And she was like, wow, like, can you believe this? These smell so good. And I was like, to be amazed at something as small as flowers smelling good, as adults, we take that for granted. And to see somebody be so excited about something so small, but that is still amazing, like, reminds us to enjoy the little things.
Right. To be a kid again, we can get a lot of inspiration from them.
Yes. Yeah. Learn so much from them. Yeah. Eni, thank you so much for joining me today. Please let the people know where they can find you and how they can keep in touch with you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok. I know sometimes on YouTube, sometimes, but not really. But on Instagram and TikTok at Any Given Sunday. So that's ENI Given Sunday. And I also have a blog as well, so anygivensunday.com, to check out some of the longer form thoughts that I have or longer form content that I put out. So yeah, super excited to do, everything that's ahead, and really glad I could be here today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for coming and just for sharing with us and inspiring us to continue choosing ourselves, betting on ourselves. We'll make sure all your info is linked in the show notes so everybody can find you. I'm sure y'all are already following me. I know you are. So, but in case like the 5 of you may be listening that aren't, we'll have all of her information linked in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening this week, and we will see you next Tuesday.